Hi everyone, I'm Rico Sinclair. My pronouns are he and they, and we're here to talk about LGBT History Month. I am a black male with a beard and an earring with a short afro wearing a black t-shirt. I'm joined by the incredible Sue Sanders, who is going to be introducing themselves for us all. Hi Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue Sanders. I'm a white older woman, 73 to be precise, with grey hair, glasses, one earring, which is a dragon, and I'm wearing a purple shirt with the LGBT History Month badge for this year.
Woo-hoo! So shall we dive straight in then? First of all, should we talk a little bit about the origins of LGBT History Month?
Sure.
We get started.
Yeah. Well, I had been working with an amazing man called Paul Patrick, who, like me, was a drama teacher. And he and I found each other, way back in the 70s, I think. There was an amazing organization called the Gay Teachers Group, which started back in 74. Neither Paul nor I were in that very beginning group, but it morphed into Schools Out, which Paul and I discovered and became members of and eventually became co-chairs of. And throughout Section 28, and for those of you who don't know about Section 28, be grateful. For those of you that do, you know how bad it was. Paul and I did oodles of work with Schools Out, doing training, writing materials, setting up conferences for LGBT teachers. But 15 years of Section 28 was horrendous. So when it finished in 2003, Paul and I were very keen to move away from the whole victim thing that we had been engrossed in with Section 28 and actually think about celebration. So we had been playing with the idea of having an LGBT History Month. We'd both seen the value of Black History Month, although it has to be said, schools did and probably still do, to my knowledge, do a lot of American rather than British Black history, which is a shame. But we thought, well, it would be grand if we could get an LGBT History Month. So we went to the Department of Education. We had a quick chat. They said they would be interested and they might give us a bit of money. It dragged on and on and on. And we had decided on February because February was a quiet month for schools and it had a half term. And that was very important to us because we thought, well, if libraries and museums pick it up, then teachers and parents and students might see some of that stuff and then feel more confident to take it back into schools. So come November, we still hadn't heard from the DFE, but we felt, well, we have to launch it. So we had a big launch at the Tate Modern. I was working in Southwark at the time, and a brilliant man who had just been appointed DAX to the Southwark Council arranged this launch at the Tate Modern. There's 13 of us on the platform, which does seem a bit over the top. But the reason for that was I was absolutely determined that we would see the full diversity of the LGBT community. So I had 3 trans people. I had LGBT people of many different ethnicities and religions, disabled, able-bodied, and a heterosexual ally. So my intention from the very start was to say, we are dealing with the rich diversity of our community. And I said to the DFE, when they eventually gave us a tiny little pot of money, if we get 10 events happening in February, I will consider it a success, given how late everything has been. We had over 100 the first year.
Talk about success.
Well, yes, and my goddess, has it grown since then. Absolutely. But I think that Paul and I really picked up the energy that people had once 28 had gone, and people wanted to do something. And we designed it so it was grassroots. We set up the website, the calendar is on the website. We give it over to everybody and say, you do your thing. Our job is to make sure the website is there, that there are lots of resources there that you can use, and they've built them up and changed over the years. And you get out and do what you want to do.
Do you think it's important that the entire community acknowledges the month, even though there are some parts of the LGBT community that don't necessarily feel...
I didn't quite hear the first sentence.
Well, apologies. Do you think it's important that the entire community acknowledges the month, even though some parts of the LGBT community might not necessarily feel like they're reflected in LGBT history?
I think it's vital. as I say, I mean, for me, the full diversity of our community must be reflected. And we do try and make that point when we say to people, you know, go out, do your own event. Some people don't take that on board. And I can only just reiterate and say this is what LGBT History Month is about. But for me, the job of the month is not just to educate heterosexual people about LGBT people, and goddess, do they need that, but also our community. And we, you know, there are lots of things that we don't know about each other now, let alone in the past. So for me, the whole intention of the month is educational for us all, and to be as reflective of the diversity of the community as possible.
So off the back of that, what do you think that the LGBT community can do to ensure our histories, both local and national, aren't forgotten by future generations?
Well, I think there's a variety of things we can do. I mean, if you look back to 2005, when Paul and I first got it, and I have to say that Paul died in 2008, so I've lost him. And then Tony Fennick took over and worked with me up until last summer, and then he died. So it's been quite hard. Some of the, you know, really crucial people have gone, but we've got a new group of people working. And I think if you were to look at how local museums, the big museums and libraries have changed in those years, there's been a very big shift in the recognition that they need to be reflective of the diversity of population. And that's because lots of LGBT people have been going to their local museums, saying they want to be reflected in there, often using the month as a way of opening the doors. And the whole intention of the month was it's a door opener. It's not there that we just get stuck in February, but we can then open the door and then we can be there for the rest of the year. But it is a useful door opener. And I think, you know, when you look at what museums and libraries have done, maybe they've started with a very small event in February and then thought, hang on, why are we just doing it then? Why are we just doing a small exhibition? Why isn't it in the whole of our exhibition and embedded within everything that we do? And I think that has shifted. And of course, I think the whole concept around Black Lives Matter has been an incredibly important move as well, as people have begun to say, hang on, we're being left behind, we are being made invisible. I mean, one of my favorite phrases has been, we've often been hidden in plain sight. Now, as LGBT people, we can be hidden in plain sight because, you know, we're not that obvious, perhaps, although I try to be as obvious as I can. But, you know, there you go. But obviously, when you're dealing with Black history, the invisibilizing of Black people has been outrageous, but there is now a big movement to recognize that that is not acceptable. And of course, there is a backlash, but we have to keep fighting. We have to keep making sure that where public money is spent, the whole of the population is there. And the beauty of the Equality Act does give us that. We can waive that. I mean, that is amazing that 2010, we had the Equality Act and we've got the public duty there, which says you've got to educate about all the different strands. So it's a very useful thing to be able to wave at people and say, you receive public money, this is your job.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. Can you talk to us a bit about the website, Schools Out, and the archive?
Okay, well, we've got several websites.
Yeah.
The first one was the Schools Out one, and I have to say, poor old Schools Out, she's the mother of all these things, and like many mothers, she has been somewhat, what's the word, forgotten. We will be returning to that website and cheering it up a bit. But I guess the Schools Out website at the moment has generally got policy on it, and we try and put things on it which are specifically useful to teachers and to educators. Then we produced the Classroom website. Now, the Classroom website was built on after LGBT History Month, and it was really the intention that I had was to produce lesson plans for teachers that they could use across the curriculum. There were lots of people who were doing the gay lesson, which I found very offensive and problematic. And really what I wanted was LGBT to be everywhere. Now, people were using the word normalizing. Now, I found that a really problematic word. It has sort of all sorts of problematic connotations. So I came up with a concept of usualizing. So on the Classroom website, we usualize LGBT people and issues across the curriculum for all ages. And I think there are about 60 lesson plans there. And now we have linked up with the Proud Trust, and they have done a big piece of work and have produced another whole series of brand new lessons, which you can get to through our classroom website. So, and it explains how to usualize and how to actualize. And then there's the LGBT History Month website, which is just chocker, full of resources, and has, you know, adapted over the years, and we've done all sorts of things. So in 2011, for the first time, we came up with the idea of doing a theme. So the first 2 years, with the Olympics coming up, we did 2 years functioning, you know, focusing on sport. It was a pretty dearth, it has to be said. There wasn't that much. If we did it now, I think we'd have, you know, have a whole lot more resources. But if you look on the website, you'll see all the different resources that we've produced for all the different subjects, like science and maths and history and music and PHSE and all sorts of things. So lots of free resources, posters, etc., that you can download. And then 6 years ago, Dr. Jeff Evans, who was on the Committee of Schools Out, came to me and said, "So we've been running History Month now for 10 years, but we're not really collecting our history." And he was right. Lots of wonderful things were happening in LGBT History Month. Fabulous, you know, drag stuff, quizzes, people getting flags up on important buildings, getting pedestrian crossings becoming rainbows, wonderful films, theatre, big conferences, all sorts of really exciting things, but not that much history. So Jeff, who'd been doing a thesis on men having sex and down the ages, had begun to make academic links. And he said, I think we can do something about this. So we set up the National LGBT History Festival. And now if you go on outingthepast.com, you'll find we have this year 18 virtual hubs. So what we do every year is we put out a call for people to offer us a 20-minute presentation on LGBT history, and then we put it in a gazette, and we send that gazette to all the hubs that have agreed to host an event, and they choose what they want. So this year, 18 hubs. Very excited, very much looking forward to what's coming out of that. And obviously, we can't guarantee that all those amazing presentations are going to be picked up by our Out in the Past hubs. So we make them available across the board. So on the LGBT History Month website and OTP website, there's a list of all the people who want their presentations to be available to other organizations. And then we're hoping at the end of the month, after we've taken a big breath, we will then put up the video presentations that people are prepared to share. So the whole idea is that we get history out there. And my dream is that educators pick some of those up and begin to, you know, build much more information so that we can actually have decent LGBT history in schools and universities and colleges. Mm. The archive you mentioned is at Bishopsgate, and I sent them 56 boxes full of material that I had collected over the years. Some of which had nothing to do with Schools Out. Maybe I had just been to their event. Some of it is Schools Out stuff. Some of it is papers, but it's all beautifully digitalized so that you can see what's in all the boxes, as it were. And then once we can go out again, when will that be? You'll be able to pop into Bishopsgate. And I chose Bishopsgate as the archive because they are so friendly and make things so easily available to anybody going in. You don't have to have an appointment. You just pop in, and Steph Dickers and his staff are just wonderful about looking after you and showing you stuff. And he has built the most amazing LGBT archive down there. He's got fabulous things.
That sounds absolutely great. I can't wait to take a trip to Bishopsgate and go and check it out.
It's brilliant. It really is.
How do you think on-screen representation has contributed to change in the community?
I think it's crucial. I mean, I mentioned the 2010 Equality Act and the public duty, and we've got to have laws. I mean, obviously, having lived as long as I have and seen Section 28 and seen the effect of the vicious attacks on gay men because of the laws, and the effect that having no laws, in a sense, had on lesbians, we became very invisible. Laws can make a difference. However, culture really is the biggie, because culture challenges stereotypes and challenges prejudice. So for me, part of Outing the Past, not only do we do those presentations, but we also commission theatre. So we commission theatre which has stories from the hidden histories. So I think theatre and film are incredibly important. I mean, one of the phrases that I use is that you learn through your heart as well as your brain. And I think that's so powerful. So I think culture, film, television, theatre, art in all its many forms is incredibly important in enabling people to understand, to get used to see, to be introduced to people and ideas that they would not normally come across. And for me, that's the crucial thing about culture. And obviously film plays a very important part, because film, particularly now because of COVID, you don't just make an effort to go down to the cinema. It gets, shoved into your living room and you can access it very easily. And I think, it's incredibly powerful. And I think the effect that Russell T Davies's episodes at the moment on AIDS is having an incredibly powerful and educational effect. I think I've seen some amazing pieces written by men who said, I lived through that, I suppressed it, I didn't want to deal with it, and it's so important that I begin to get in touch with what my feelings and deal with those issues through this medium of seeing those pieces. And I think film, television, theatre can do that. It can make a very positive difference. I mean, to me, it's no accident that Paul and I were both drama teachers who came up with the idea of doing, LGBT History Month. We both know the importance of culture and the immediacy that performance can do.
Could you tell us your favourite film depicting
Goddess? Well, I think it's really hard, but I think, and I'm acutely aware that I am not getting to see a lot of stuff that's out there at the moment, partially because I'm now living on the coast in Kent. I used to be a Londoner, but we moved down because my partner's health needed it, and we needed to retire a bit, although I don't seem to have managed to do that at all. But the two films that really stick out for me as far as giving us history are Pride and Are You Proud? Pride being the amazing film looking at what Mark Ashton did to gather us all together to support the miners. And in fact, Mark Ashton is one of the 5 faces this year for LGBT History Month. Our theme is mind, body and spirit, and we have 5 faces, and Mark is one of them. And I think that's a fabulous film. And I think the importance of that film is that it shows how one person can make a difference. One person wakes up and then talks to other people and then gets other people to think, gosh, yes, I hadn't thought of that. That's an interesting idea. And then it grows. And the very fact that he took us to think about the miners at a time when the stereotype for us as LGBT people was the miners wouldn't care a damn about us. But he saw the link between how the miners were being treated by the Thatcher government and how we were being treated by the Thatcher government, and said, look, we need to support each other. And the power of that support meant that the unions began to recognize that they needed to take on LGBT issues. Now, when I told you about Gay Teachers Group back in 1974, they set themselves up because there was nobody supporting them. The National Union of Teachers didn't care a damn whether you were lesbian or gay. They probably preferred you not to be, and certainly not tell them. So the unions weren't interested at all. So that's why they set up that group. Mark's intervention in supporting the miners woke up the NUM, woke up the Trade Union Council. And now look at what unions do for LGBT people. It is phenomenal. They have a conference every year for LGBT representatives across the union. We're normally there. It's normally in June, and LGBT History Month is there. And that's usually when we start telling people about next year, telling people what our theme is, and selling our badges. Well, they've moved it now to February, and it's going to be virtual. But it's great that the unions, woke up, and that's very much to do with what Mark did in supporting the miners. The other film I think that I found really useful, again, about sort of history, is Are You Proud?, which was started off by a young man who didn't really see the point of pride. and I may have this story right, I hope I have, but his mother said, who is an out lesbian, said, what on earth are you on about? It's the most important thing. So he went off and began to work out, why do we have pride, and discovered it and talked to lots of people. And again, I think it's a really useful, those two films should be shown in schools. They are really useful films showing people, educating people about who we are, why we care so much, not only just about ourselves, but about human rights and civil rights in general. And I think one of the things that I'm acutely aware of is when LGBT people get together to tackle injustice. And I was a member of the LGBT advisory group to the Metropolitan Police. And when we set it up, we were very keen to make sure that we would hit LGBT and all the diversity of that. But when we first sat down, we also talked about Black issues, about disabled issues, about poverty. And the police kept saying, hang on a second, you're supposed to be in the LGBT group. I mean, we keep saying, look around the room. You know, we are all these things. Wake up and smell the coffee. You can't just tackle homophobia on its own. You've got to tackle racism, misogyny, disableism, you know, poverty. You've got to do it all. We can't just be, you know, focused on one thing, because that's not true to who we are, or we'll deal with all the issues.
Agreed. I completely agree with that. So last question.
Yes.
What's in store for you and LGBT History Month in the future?
Well, I suppose that in the future, the vain hope is that we're not needed. That, you know, we get to a point when this isn't necessary. And one does hope that all the work that one's doing in schools to make us visible in schools and to tackle homophobia and to do the educational stuff, that eventually that won't be needed because it'll all be there. You want to work as an activist to make yourself unnecessary. Otherwise, you know, what's the point of doing it? So that would be, you know, the hope in the end. I think that what I hope is, given my age, I'm hoping that the youngsters will come along, want to be interested, and we have a few joining us who want to pick up the ideas, develop them, do different things with them, make it more realistic to all the groups that don't feel included by LGBT History Month at the moment, so that it does become more reflective of the diversity of our community. We do our best, but we can't do everything because we're a very small volunteer group, no funding, where, you know, we all do it because we're passionate about it. And it's pretty mad. I mean, the hours that we all work. But we need some other youngsters or other people coming in and helping us so that we make it more diverse and more reflective of all the generations.
Well, thank you for that, Sue. That was super enlightening. And yeah, any youngsters out there, get involved.
Exactly. Yes, and buy a badge.
Buy a badge.
Buy the badge on the shop. Normally, when I'm in a room, nobody leaves a room without buying one. I have a card, so people can. Oh, I don't have any cash. No worries, I have a card machine here.
Really good sales technique.
Well, I can't do that now. All I can say is, if you buy the badge, I will get the order through and I will pop it in an envelope and send it off to you the very day I receive it.
So do it. There's no excuse. Thank you so much, Sue, and we'll see you soon.